Hello, everybody. This is Nick Morell from Audio Video Export. It's an absolute pleasure to be able to bring this webinar to you guys today, May 18th of 2021. We're talking today about design systems, specifically as it relates to audio for restaurants. This has been a building block process that we've been doing over this past month as it relates to the different family of Harman products, as well as other complementary products that Audio Video Export represents. It's an absolute pleasure to introduce to you guys, if you have not met them or spoken with them before, Luis Alfonso, who is our level 2 engineer with Harman, as well as Jose Valcárcel of Harman, both of them located in Puerto Rico, Jose is our salesperson, primary contact, technical support, and everything else that we could possibly ask for. Thank you guys both so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Nick, for the invite, and welcome everybody. It's as usual. It's a pleasure to be here, and you know, we'll be for the next hour and a half, whatever questions that you might have available. Okay, thank you, Nick, once again.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks to everybody.
You got it. So as typical, there is a question box. If you do have any questions, please feel free to place a question in the question box. If we do not cover it during the presentation, we will make sure that we get to that towards the end. And awesome, on we go. So as we had mentioned before, this is a building block process that we had started with some of the previous, whether it be the hotel and whatnot. And there are a couple others that are going to be coming towards the future. So we've got, with Harman, this family of products, which includes an entire family of products. So you've got AKG microphones, you've got Soundcraft mixers, DBX processing, you've got BSS digital processing, AMX control and video distribution, amongst others. You got Martin lighting, Crown amplification, JBL speakers. We've got a solution that goes from, if you're looking at a block diagram, which what you see on the screen is almost like a block diagram. You can see from the very beginning, which is your sources, all the way to the very end, which is your speakers. We've got a solution for you. And so that's one of the great things about working with Harman family of products, is that for the most part, it's all covered here, and whatever little bit might not be covered, Audio Video Export might have something for it. So Harman doesn't deal in the video side so much. They deal in the video distribution side, but not in the video itself. So for that, we've got, for instance, NEC projectors and monitors, etc. So this is just to give you an example, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We have talked a little bit about that in some of the other processes. So when we're talking about restaurant systems, some of the things that we want to be able to consider, we're going to talk a little bit about 70-volt systems, different kinds of audio processing, as well as some of the other things that you see here on the screen. I'm not much of a read off the screen type of guy. I like to be able to show you a lot of visuals, so this is not going to be boring. Where I'm just reading that nobody needs that. You guys can do that on your own. So we're just going to review some of those different things. One of the things that's really most important for the process is figuring out what the budget is and the scope of work, right? So a lot of people in Latin America and the Caribbean, they say, oh, I can't really ask what the budget is. It's kind of like taboo for me to ask. And I haven't seen that so much in the English-speaking Caribbean as I have in more the Spanish-speaking mainland. But really, this is not something that we're trying to, if the budget's $10,000, we're not trying to max out the budget. That's not what we're trying to do. If you know me, you know that there are a million, you've heard me say this 100,000 times before, there are a million ways to do the exact same thing in audio and video. And some of them, depending on what the budget is, have more bells and whistles and features, and some of them have fewer bells and whistles and features. Some you may need, some you may not need. So what we're really trying to do, for instance, I'll give you a good for instance. In monitors, you can have a 55-inch monitor. But depending on what the application is and what the budget is, we may need a monitor that's going to be a little bit brighter than others. And obviously, the brighter monitor we go, the more expensive it's going to be. But if we don't know what the budget is, well, I'm going to give you what my opinion is based on my professional experience. But if you don't tell me what the budget is, we might be pricing ourselves out. So it's important for us to be able to always get to know what that is. And I liken it this way. A customer, because sometimes, people confuse, well, the customer doesn't know how much a project is going to cost. Well, I'm not asking you that question. You're right. The customer may not know how much a system costs, but they do know how much they want to spend on that system. If they want a home theater system, you can do a home theater system for $1,000 and you can do a home theater system for $1 million, right? And each of those are going to be, completely different. So it's really important for us to be able to spend some time and be able to figure out, well, how much does the customer actually really legitimately want to spend on this project? And what's the scope of work, and what kind of location is it, so that we can figure out exactly and comply with what it is that you need. And I don't mean to harp on that too much, but it's really critically important that we get this idea out of our heads that asking for a budget and a scope of work is taboo or negative. It's not. We just want to be able to give you, as our integrator, as the person who's brought this project to us, we want to be able to give you the exact design that it is that you need that's going to comply with both the budget and the scope of work. That way nobody has to go back and do this twice. Because I love designing projects. I think that Jose and Luis, you guys would probably agree with me that designing projects is probably the most fun aspect of everything it is that we do on a daily basis. It's not the order administration. It's not the finding, what the back order process is. It's, hey, let's dig our heels in and let's, figure out, how to be able to fit this puzzle piece together and being able to do that. But if we have to redesign it because we had bad information the first time, well, it's not so much fun anymore. And I would imagine, I guarantee it's the same way for our dealers as well. So let's just spend some time and be able to talk honestly about what that budget is and what that scope of work is. We're going to talk a little bit today about how to select the speakers, the amplifiers, and the processor, and a little bit about control and monitoring. As with this building project, this building process that we've been doing for these past few webinars and continue to do, this is an actual job that we've done, and this is just a floor plan of the restaurant that is that we did. And so let me get my highlighter here. Oh, I lost it. Clicked on the wrong thing too fast. Here we go. So we've got our lobbies, our elevators, and then the front reception area where the customers are going to be coming in to be seated. There will be a desk here in order to be able to receive the people. You've got an outdoor area, so it's open air, but it does have a roof on it. And you've got you have landscaping all along here, along this zigzag, and along the exterior. That's all landscaping and a balcony style, right? And then you've got an open floor space for an open floor space for seating, more dining area seats over here and here. And then you've got your kitchen and then your wait staff and bathrooms and whatnot. So the scope of work was fairly simple. We just had, we're going to talk about different options. We're going to pick a different scope than was actually used. But I'm going to go through some of that stuff with you with different scopes of work. So some people may or may not be familiar with when to use 70 volts. A lot of people who are specialize in the residential space, you don't really deal with 70 or 100 volts. 100 volts is really more the European standard. Most of the amplifiers that are 70 volts can also do 100, but for the American standard, we find 70 volts is the go-to. When to use which? Your 70 volt system is definitively used for a higher quantity of speaker, longer cable lengths, and for lower budgets. Right, so if you needed to put 20 speakers on a single channel, well, you can't do that on low impedance without speaker selection. And then with speaker selectors or impedance matching speaker selectors, that gets really difficult, and you have to have an insane amount of amplification. What it's doing is it's trying to hijack and kind of create a 70 volt system without actually having 70 volt transformers, and it's really just not fruitful. So if you wanted 70 volt, if you wanted 20 speakers, all on a single channel or on a couple channels, you can do that with 70 volts very easily. The advantage here is that you've got, it's all parallel, right? Positive to positive, negative to negative cabling. It's really, really simple. You can just daisy chain all those speakers, and you don't need to bring any of those speaker cables back. Your advantage with low impedance, so non-70 volts, so 8 ohm, low impedance is the proper term, is going to be your quality. You've got a better dynamic range. So 70 volts transformers will oftentimes cut out on the low end of your frequencies, so you won't get a whole lot on the base, but your low impedance can hit those frequencies, and you can generally get a lot more volume out of a low impedance system.
Nick, let me add something regarding that 70 volt, 100 volt that you just mentioned, because this morning we had a meeting, with a client based in Mexico City. And besides what you said already, that usually the 100 volts, it's more typical to be used in Europe. Our amps, and I'm sure you will go through that, are able to handle both regulations, 70 volts or 100 volts. 100 volt means that probably you can reach a higher distance, less how you say this,
Resistance.
you have to resistance, and your sound quality is not the same one as in a 70 volt situation. But once again, we're here to, if you need to deal with 100 volt because the distance are that long, just let us know, and we are more than willing, to figure out for you. Okay.
Yeah, that's a great thing about these Crown amplifiers in particular, is that they've got 70 volt and 100 volt options on them. Depending on which one it is, it'll be either a physical connection or it'll be a digital, just a setting, and internally it changes that. And I've never seen a speaker itself that doesn't have both 70 and 100 volt on it. I've always seen them both. So it gives you great flexibility. Again, most of the time you're going to see 70 volts in the Western Hemisphere, but every now and then you'll get maybe it's a European company that has offices in your territory, whether it be in Jamaica or Cayman Islands or Trinidad or wherever it may be, and you'll see that they have the European standard. Just because that's what they're using in their other applications. So going with the Harman, you've got that flexibility. So thank you for that, Jose. And please do feel free, Luis, also to jump in whenever you guys feel that there's anything else that needs to be added. So the calculations for 70 volts is very simple. You're just taking the tap that you're going to use at that speaker, and then you're going to multiply that by the quantity of speakers that you've got in the line, and that's going to give you the total watt per channel that you need. We always recommend, as just a good best practice, you add 20% to that wattage. So if your total wattage comes out to be, 100, add an extra 20% to that, just to be, give yourself a little bit extra of push, which puts you at around 125 watts. Not multiplying by 1.2, we definitely want to divide by 0.8, that we've got that extra just in case, whether that be for a peak in the sounds or whether that be, hey, we forgot we needed to add one extra speaker here, and you can do that without having to change out your amplifier in its entirety, depending on what the size of the amplifier is. Right? Some good little calculators that are on the screen here. You guys will get a copy of this and you'll see the recording and whatnot. So what we need to be able to do is we need to make sure that we take a look at these calculators, and I'll show you what the page looks like here. You got your first, which is the distributed design system. So for your in-ceiling speakers, you've got a 100 foot by a 100 foot, and you don't know how many speakers need to fit inside of that space. Well, this is the exact software that you need in order to be able to figure out how many speakers you need to be able to cover it. And you can do different options, whether you wanted it better coverage, so you've got a lot more overlap, or whether you've got edge-to-edge coverage, which is going to bring down the cost, but you're going to have more variance of sound pressure levels as you walk between speakers, or whether you're going to have less edge blending than even that. So you've got a little bit more space, which only means that you're going to have more volume variation as you walk from one side of the room to the other side of the room, as you go from one, directly below one speaker to directly below the next speaker. You're going to have more of a variance in sound pressure level there. Right? So that's the first calculator that you're going to want, and then this is the second calculator for you to be able to calculate your line loss. Now, the line loss is almost never going to be an issue if you're using 16 or better gauge cable and you're under 10,000 feet on a 70 volt system. You can do it just for good measure, and yes, I did say 10,000 feet on a 16 gauge cable. It's really impressive what it is that we can do, and I got a little chart here in a moment. Just to give you a little example here, you've got your Control 47 low profile speaker that's on the screen. This is the backside of an amplifier that, as you notice, it gives you a 70 and a 100 volt option versus an 8 or a 4 ohm. This is a little bit more manual, the process is, as opposed to one of the higher end amplifiers that does it all digitally. You just have a positive and a negative. So in this kind of a scenario, you would do a common, right? In this case, the common to the 70 volt, and then would be your negative, and then your 70 volt would be your positive. And you just daisy chain them all, positive to positive, negative to negative. You can see that we're tapping these all at 15 watts. In my opinion, and I don't know if Jose and Luis, you agree or disagree, but in my opinion, for most background music, 15 watts is generally like the standard, or are you finding something else to be the standard for your standard background music? Higher or lower?
Well, it's depend mostly on the noise, ambient noise, but usually 15 watts it's more than enough, to be honest. Unless
So-
that you are in a really noisy place or not really noisy restaurant that you really need a little more, but then it doesn't become a background music, it becomes a little more foreground. So that's the thing, 15 watts, that's good.
So, and another point of reference here for those who are unfamiliar, the taps are mostly set in multiples are doubling, right? So you'll oftentimes see, for instance, what is it, a 3.25 to a 7.5 to a 15 to a 30 watt to a 60 watt tap, right?
Right.
So when we increase those taps and we double the power that's going to each of those speakers, for the benefit of those who don't know, how much volume are we actually adding each one of those tap settings?
Okay, but basically you are adding 3 dBs, acoustic dBs, or 3 decibels, so every time that you double the power. So the thing is that you compensate for the distance of the speaker, the height of the ceiling. If you want to maintain like I don't know, maybe a 87 dB, and if the ceiling has different heights, you can adjust and add a little more power, so you can keep in those 87 dBs all the time. But basically that's the rule. Every time you double the power, you get 3 dBs more.
Perfect. And so again, for those who are not familiar, 3 decibels of a difference is just the first notch of you being able to hear the difference actually in volume. So if you wanted to be able to double, because the volume scale in decibels is logarithmic, it is not linear. So in order for you to be able to double the power, you actually have to go 10 decibels, which means if you're doubling, or you double the power, that's 3 dB, but you need to go 10 dB in order to be able to double the volume. So really you have to go double again, and then double a third time. So you're 8 times more power. So the difference between 3.5 watts, you have to go 3 notches up, right? 3.5 to 7, 3.25 to 7.5 to 15, right? Is still not there. You have to go from 3.25 all the way to 30 watts of power. Did I do that right in my head? All the way to 30 watts of power just to be able to double the perceived volume. So, just considerations. The difference between 15 and 30 watts is a doubling in power, but it's only a 3 decibel increase in volume. You're going to get a lot more on the low end than that, but really still remember that there are limitations on what you can do on a 70 watt system on the low end frequencies. But 15 watts is your standard from what it is that we've seen. This is the chart that we were talking about before. You can see at 16 gauge, you're only losing 3 decibels at 9,000 feet at 70 watts. So you can go 9,000 feet on 16 gauge cable, and be fine. You're going to be okay. You don't need to worry about any kind of a thicker gauge. If you needed to go further than that because you're doing an airport or just a ginormous large property, then you're good. You can use 14 gauge or you can use 12 gauge. But once you start getting into that, we're really talking about 3 miles here. 14,000 feet is 2.5, 2.75 miles. So we're really talking about a really long length of cable, and most of the time you're going to need more amplification or whatever, just because of the number. So just keep that in mind, all different considerations. The point is, though, is that on 70 volts, you don't have to go with an extraordinarily thick cable in order to be able to go with these long distances like you would in low impedance. Speaker considerations, we're going to talk about a couple of the different families. Many of them are a couple of them are similar in quality. So this is a Control 6 series speaker, the 6D series speaker rather, and this is equivalent to the Control 40 series speaker as it relates to quality. But this is the only one in dependent size. So you've got what are the different sizes that we have here, Jose? I know we've got a 6.5, we've got a 5.25, but we've got a smaller one too, right?
You have a 2 inches, which is the smallest one to your right. We have about 4 inches, 5.25, and 6.5.
Yeah.
Plus,
there's no
obviously, the subwoofer. That's right.
So what's the size of the sub on this one? It's 8 or
8 inches. 8 inches.
Now, our recommendation in order to be able to do subwoofers properly on 70 volts is actually for that subwoofer, even though it does have a transformer in it, is to bypass that if it all is that you can, or really be able to get some of those lower end frequencies. What's the normal tap out that we, or that not the tap rather, but what's the normal frequency that we can expect to see, the lowest frequency that we can expect to see on any kind of a low end speaker, Jose or Luis, on a 70 volt system?
That one is for Luis. This series, for example, I know that we're talking about that Contour 60, the pendant type of subwoofer. So Luis, do you have lowest frequency?
Well, not exactly, but usually if you go by 70 volts, you will not be able to see, less than 60 hertz, more or less. Then the transformers start to saturate and it doesn't do good. On impedance, you can go as low as 50, maybe. But usually you're staying around 60, 70 hertz, on frequency.
And for an 8-inch in ceiling or a pendant speaker, that's pretty good and impressive. So
yeah, it adds you like a little more ambience, it gives a little depth on the sound. It's not a sub, like a front fighting sub, like for dance music or something like that, but it makes the sound a lot more, let's say, nice.
Yeah, I agree. I think the proper word there is depth. It gives you a three-dimension, a depth to the audio that you wouldn't otherwise be able to get.
Yeah, I think, Nick, you call that a depth, which is probably the right word, versus boom boom. Okay, yeah. This type of speaker won't get you that very low and boom boom. Okay, we do have alternative solutions that you can combine this type of a speaker just in case that you're looking for that very low end punchy type of subwoofer.
Yep. So the other types of speakers that you would be looking at for an in ceiling would be, again, the Control 40. So if you've got a mix of the pendants and in ceiling, I recommend that you stick with the 40 series speakers because it's the exact same speaker except in a different housing, right? But then in ceiling, if you've got maybe a tighter budget and you need something a little bit less expensive, there's a 20 series, which is kind of the in between, and then the 10 series, which is it's not the most entry level, but it's kind of your go-to on a background music where audio needs to be present, but not really listened to, if that makes sense. So if you needed something that was going to be a little bit more acoustically better in quality, the 20 series and the 40 series, the 40 series is my favorite of all of it, especially with the waveguides and whatnot. We've also got, in addition to this, our famous mushroom style. This is the 8-inch and then the 5 1/4. There's no 6 1/2 here. It's got an 8 and a 5 1/4. It's the Control 88 and the Control 85M, and both of them do come with transformers, so you can do them low impedance or 70 volt, no problem. And then we've got our family of on-wall speakers. So you've got your Control 23, which is is that a 3 1/4? Because I know some of the nomenclature gets a little odd. You've got your Control 25, which is a 5 1/4, and then you've got Control 28, which is an 8. Those are the first three that you got here. The bigger one here that can either be the Control 29 or the Control 30 or the 31. Those have different components inside. Why don't you guys talk a little bit about the difference between the Control 29, 30, and 31? What separates them from the rest of the Control series?
Well, some of those models are 3-ways, and the rest are just 2-way. So if you want like to have a little more frequencies, you can go by the 3-way systems. Basically, the most difference are the drivers. The woofers usually are in Kevlar, so they're a little more resistant to humidity and to the outdoor environment. And on the high side, the tweeters, the 23, 25, 28 are soft dome tweeters. Just on the other models, they go to high compression driver tweeters. So you got like a little more heavy duty driver for manage of the high frequencies.
Awesome. So they do come with the uniball style of mount, and then on them we can also take a look at the optional U-bracket if we needed to be able to do that. So there are certain accessories to those. Now in ceiling, and I didn't mention the accessories at all, there are, because I know that in the Caribbean especially, which is where we're tailoring this presentation to for our English-speaking customers in the Caribbean, there are accessories that you can get for a weatherized grill. I know that without the weatherized grill, you can do humidity environments. It's not an issue, but you can buy for salt environments, a WeatherX grill, which we would recommend for those high salt, high salinity areas. Now, our amplifiers, this is kind of my favorite of the series of amplifiers. There's a whole set of it. There's the XLI, there's the XTI, there's the XLC. Those are more of your retail-friendly amplifiers. Some of them have DSP, some of them don't. There's a Crown the CDI that's not drive core, which is the CDI 1000, 2000, 4000, 6000, which are also excellent amplifiers. They're Class AB. They are tried and true. Warm sounds, great quality. Just they work. They're just workhorses. My favorite is this one, is the CDI Drive Core series for umpteen different reasons. But the biggest one is the Drive Core technology that's backed up behind it. So Drive Core, in its most oversimplistic, makes it a Class D amplifier, which increases your efficiency, which lowers your cost of operation because it's not consuming as much power, which also lowers your cost of operation because it's not heating as much as a Class AB amplifier. Class AB amplification as a standard loses about 40 to 50% of the energy it consumes in heat, right? So that's 40 to 50% inefficiency, which makes it 50 to 60% efficient. The Drive Core series of amplification Class D as a standard throughout the entire industry is over 90% efficient, which means that you're losing a lot less energy in heat and in driving it. So you don't have to worry as much about thermal management as it relates to your racks. So I know that, you know, if you're not doing any kind of thermal management with Middle Atlantic or the racks that it is that we're selling, you're missing out, because it's important to extend the life of the products, as well as it's really to extend the life of the product, because you don't really care about heat except as it relates to the life of the product. Heat is just, it kills all electronics, period. So you've got extended life here, you've got much more efficiency, lower cost of operation because you're not consuming as much electricity, and which is also good as it relates to battery backups too. So you don't really see a whole lot of battery backups in amplification, but in your other devices as well. So it's good to have. But the Drive Core series here, we've got DSP built in, you've got your options for 70 volt or low impedance, you've got a 2 and a 4 channel variety, and I think the biggest amplifier as it relates to this particular series is 1,200 watts per channel. And then you have two flavors as it relates to the Blue Link versus not Blue Link. So if you're familiar with the other Blue devices, which we'll talk about in just a little bit, the Blue Link is a great avenue for you to be able to send audio information digitally over a category cable from point to point with Harman. It is a proprietary technology, which is phenomenal. Now, going into our block diagram that we were talking about, obviously the first thing that it is that you're going to deal with is going to be your sources. So this is a Sonos port, which for me is just an easy, almost all instances you're going to be using some sort of music reproduction device. Some people will use a computer, which is fine, or a telephone, which I don't generally like, because if you're using a telephone itself and it's over Bluetooth, well, what happens when you get a notification? Well, it interrupts the audio. The advantage of having Sonos is that your phone is the remote control for the Sonos. It's not the actual streaming device for the Sonos. So you can stream your Spotify, or you know, if you're in a commercial environment, you really should be using something like hotels.radio, which is for the licensing purposes, allows the licensing for you to be able to play in a hotel environment. If you're using Spotify in a commercial environment, that's really not the way that the licensing is supposed to work. You're supposed to be using a commercially approved for the purposes of licensing, and Sonos supports all of those different types of devices. If for whatever reason you've got some obscure, lesser known service, you can use a computer, assuming that you can do it via that way, and you're good to go. Networking devices that relates to this particular project that we were working on, we recommend the AMS 1208 in this particular case, because we didn't need that many PoE ports. but for two other reasons as well. The audio video series of network switches from Luxel, which these are all Luxel products, they have the ports in the rear. Now, when you're doing any kind of a project, commercial or residential, and you're doing VLANs, my goodness, those are port specific. The last thing that you want is an end user to be going back there and, oh, I wonder what happens if I do this. And they unplug one of your network ports that has VLANs configured, and they switch it out with something else that doesn't have VLANs configured, and now your point of sale system at the restaurant doesn't work anymore because there was a VLAN specific to that, and your point of system is now open to the rest of the network, and you violated all sorts of god-awful security, because the end user decided to, hey, let me try this, see what happens. With the ports being on the back, and now you've got pretend a middle Atlantic rack that has, it's a slide-out rack or a slide-out, spinning rack. So literally, it's inside of the cabinet, it slides out for you to be able to have access to it, and you've got it with security screws so that the end user doesn't have access to any of that. You can secure your system so that you know that you're not violating any kind of security protocols, and making sure that you're not going to get bogus calls and having to go out there because a customer decided to play with the system. So that's a couple of reasons, right? Ports on the back, security. You got lights on the front so the customer knows that things are working the way that they're supposed to. You've got either domotes for you to be able to remotely enable this, remotely access this rather, and you don't have to worry about running a truck in order to be able to change the configuration because now you've got a new system, whatever the case may be, right? And you've got a fiber port that's on the on the end here. So these two ports, I don't know how well you can see it, but those two ports on the very end are standard SFP connections. So it's a 1 gigabit for distance. So if you needed to be able to run several of these switches, over a distance because you've got either multiple floors or different buildings, you can do that. Single mode you can run very easily, or multi-mode very easily as well. This would use a standard fiber optic cable, duplex in this particular case is what the go-to is. Multi-mode, you can run it comfortably 1,000 feet, whereas your maximum running of category cable, standard category 6 cable, is going to be 330 feet, 100 meters. So here with multi-mode, you can go 1,000 feet very easily. If you've got anything else, you can sometimes upgrade to a higher quality of multi-mode, and you can run 1,500 feet if you needed to be able to do that. If you're going anything further than that, you're really going to want single mode cable. And with single mode cable, depending on the electronics, which this would be an example of the electronics that you would connect, that's the actual SFP module that would connect into your switch. You can run single mode 70 kilometers. I mean, we're talking insane lengths, ISP level lengths, quite easily. So we're selling the Clearline, which has a 250-pound pull strength on it because of those Kevlar fibers, which you can see right here. That's Kevlar fibers around the actual fiber strand. 250 pounds of pull strength, just ridiculously strong that you got here. That's going to go into your LC connector, which is all sold by Clearline. That's all sold by Clearline. The SFP connector from here, this is going to be a Luxel device. So it's a Luxel SFP connection. So your cable goes into your LC goes into your SFP goes into your switch. I hope you guys all got that. I know that I talked fast, but I can review all of this with you guys. It's no problem. This is something that we really specialize in and we're really good at. Now, here's the other really neat thing about fiber. I, as an amateur fiber terminator, can terminate a fiber from Clearline connector with very few special tools in 60 seconds, each termination. I cannot do it that quickly on a category 6 cable because it takes me 60 seconds just to be able to unravel your different pairs there, right? So it takes me 60 seconds just to be able to do that. It takes me another 60 seconds to be able to flatten them out and then make sure that I get them in the right order for your A or B connection. Most people use B. T568B, if my nomenclature, if I remember correctly. But we've got all of that cabling as well from Structure Cable Products too. And it looks like I messed up a little bit in there. You would have seen the flash on it. There, we also sell from Structure Cable Products the 16.2 or 14.2 or 12.2, or if you needed 4-conductor cable as well. We carry all of that from Structure Cable Products. Now, as it relates to electrical conditioning, we want to make sure that we're using quality product. There are a lot of products that exist in the market that say that they are surge protection, but I have video evidence, and we can show you how your competitors in the world simply do not. There are only 4 brands of power protection devices that I recommend. I sell 3 of them. There's a 4th one that I can take offline and tell you which one it is if you're really interested in finding out, which is a quality brand. If you know me, I'm a straight shooter. If I sell it, great. If I don't sell it and it's a good product, I'll tell you it's a good product. But if it's not a great product, I'm going to be honest about it too. So Furman for the commercial space is hands down they're the granddaddy. They're the best. They're priced very competitively. There is no other brand that can do what Furman does in the commercial space. It doesn't matter what anybody else says. There are other great brands that exist on the market, but none of them can hold a candle to what Furman can do. And several reasons why. You'll see that there's this SMP technology that's right here, and you couple that with the EVS circuitry, and what you're finding is that these devices that have those 2 specific types of technology, they can take a direct lightning strike and keep on ticking. I'm serious. We're talking about, I don't even know how many kilojoules of energy from a direct lightning strike, and keep going, protecting your devices and not being sacrificial. Right? The fundamental difference, the other 2 brands, if you're curious of what it is that we carry that are good quality, are going to be Furman's sister brand, which are Panamax, and then the Middle Atlantic line of power protection products are also very high quality. The fundamental difference between Furman and Panamax, and this is a gross oversimplification, is that for the most part, this is not true across every single SKU, but for the most part, the Panamax products, labeled products, are sacrificial, so they have an MOV in there, moving oxide varistor, I think that's what it's called. I don't remember exactly. It's an MOV. Those are designed to pop, right? So they self-sacrifice when they receive those over voltages. They protect all of your equipment. You change them out under warranty, no problem. You pay a little bit of a premium in going to the Furman, but they are non-sacrificial. They shunt everything down to ground. They do not self-sacrifice. They keep on. They take a ticking and keep on. They take a licking and keep on ticking. Is a famous phrase that you've got here in the United States. They take the beating and they just keep going. Now, some accessories that are important, especially if we're doing fiber. This is a TechLogix product and is for your rack so that you can be able to mount your fiber products, and you can create a patch panel for your fiber, right? So you can terminate all of it just like you would a regular patch panel of category 6, and now you can do your patch panel for your fiber. This series of multi-mount rack is really convenient from Middle Atlantic. This is a 16U, 24 inches deep. It's the MMR 1624. It's multi-mount, so you can put it on the floor. You can mount it on the floor. You can put casters on it. You can mount it on the wall, and you can hinge it, if my memory serves me correctly as well. So it's a very versatile rack. If you wanted something that was a little bit more kind of plug and play, there's the Essex series, the RCS series. And that's going to be pre-built. It's going to come pre-populated. If you're familiar with the old Omni mounts that we used to sell, it's very similar to that. High quality glass door, comes fully assembled. It's great. You can buy accessories for it, but they're limited on the RCS. The MMR, it's a la carte, right? You get what you need. You don't need it, you don't buy it, and you just get exactly what it is that you need. Moving back into the audio video, here we're going to talk first again about the sources on the Harman related products. So this is kind of one of my go-to microphones because specifically it's got that mute button that's there on the front, and it's a gooseneck, right? You can do the exact same process. At the end of the day, it's an XLR connection that you're going to be connecting, a balanced XLR connection that you'll be connecting into whatever device it is that you're going to go, your preamplification. So you can do it with a gooseneck, you can do it with a wireless, you can do it with a handheld. I like the gooseneck because it's stationary. You don't have to worry about picking it up. You hit the button and you go. Right? Now, for our preamplification and our amplification, I want to talk about kind of like a good, better, and best scenario. This is our good. And if Luis or Jose, if you guys want to chime in about the VMA series in particular, I like it in this particular application because it's got the Bluetooth built in if you need it to be able to have a cheap and cheerful source, and you've got a dedicated tablet that's not going to receive notifications. If you're not, then please get something that's going to be dedicated so you don't have to worry about notifications. But I also like it because it's flexible in your microphone inputs and outputs. You guys want to talk a little bit about the VMA series?
Nick, this is basically an AV receiver, like a home theater receiver, but built for that commercial applications. Okay, you already mentioned that has Bluetooth connectivity. It also has a USB port, which if you have MP3 files that you want to plug in using a USB drive, it will play back as it is. It also has docking muting functions, and depending on the model, we have one amplifier channel or two amplifier channels, which we can combine the different inputs and matrix those depending on the situation. Luis, something else about this product that you want to add?
We may have lost Luis for a minute. So the other thing that I like.
I'm here. Sorry. It's really important. It looks like an AV receiver, but it doesn't do. It's only do audio. It doesn't manage any kind of video. That's the only thing. And on the power side, you can do 70 volts, you can do 100 volts, you can do 8 ohms. So it's a really complete solution.
It's very flexible, and I like that CSR -V port, because then you can plug in one of your volume levels. If you needed just a cheap and cheerful, simple solution to do any kind of a volume control, so you can stash the device away inside of a rack, put the volume control, out in a more public area. You've got the microphone that has the mute switch on it, and then combined with ducking. So if you're not familiar with ducking, what that means is that the amplifier, upon sensing audio coming from the microphone, will duck. Similar to actual, like, hey, somebody's throwing something at you and you duck to dodge it. So it ducks the music. It brings the volume lower on that secondary device, the audio device, so that then you can hear more prominently the microphone. And then once the mute resumes, then it brings the volume level back up automatically. And then you can use this volume control just to be able to control your overall volume. It's a simple solution. It's an inexpensive solution. It's going to do a lot of great work in your cheap and cheerful spaces, where you just need to be able to take care of something at a very low budget price point. Is there a DSP built into the VMA series?
No, sir.
No.
This is extremely analog type of situation, so no DSP is built in.
So when we need DSP or we need some more advanced specific features, this is our better solution, right? So we've got the DBX. This is the Zone Pro in the background there, and that you can see on the screen. This one is a 6x4 zone processor, but you don't have to use it as a 6x4 matrix if you don't want to. There are others that are larger that can do 12x6. Some of them you can lock out the front panel if you wanted to be able to lock out the front panel so that there are no buttons on the front. So again, for those situations where you have customers who you don't want them to have access to everything on the front panel, you can do the settings and lock it down, right? So that they've got that. Your backside here is the 640 talked about before. You have your 6 inputs, right? So you've got 2, 4, and then 2 more, so a total of 6. And then you've got your 4 outputs in this particular model. Now, the link input and the link output, I'll let Jose and Luis get into, but the ZC input, those are for your keypads, which we'll show you just an example of which in just a minute. What is that link input and output for, Jose?
It just take the input from the first unit and pass it through a Cat5 cable to the second unit, so you don't have to do like a Y cables or any kind of weird connection. It's basically just a link between the inputs.
Only the inputs, right?
Yeah, only the inputs.
Okay. So if you need to do a 6x8, then you can add a second one of these and you can link them and call it a day. And how many of these ZCs can you put in each of those chains? Because I know that it's not PoE, you link them all together. So how many of these can you put together on one of those lines?
Of the main units?
Yeah.
Okay, on the main unit, usually you can do 2, maybe 3, but like a rule of thumb, if you're gonna do like a 3 units, it's better to go to the next step, that is our VSS platform.
Forgive me, I wasn't referring to the link. I was referring to the ZC. Forgive me. I meant the ZC. How many of the ZC controllers can you put on each of those channels?
Okay, the CC, you can use 6 per channel.
Now, there's a wide variety of ZC options that are out there. You can see that it's a very simple interface. There's not a whole lot to it. In this particular case, we've got a source selector and a volume control, right? There are other ones that are simple volume, others that are simple source. It's a very simple solution, but it does way more than what the VMA does, right? Because it gives you DSP built into it. What are some of the other things that are phenomenal about the DBX before we moved into the BSS?
Well, on the VMA, you just have, like a regular volume control and maybe some treble and bass control. That's it. Here you got a full DSP. So you have crossovers, you got limiters, compressors, you got equalization, you got a whole new bunch of DSP. Plus you got delays, you got different filters like pop-up filters. It's a complete DSP unit.
And it's controlled via the software, or you program it via the software, right? So it's a free software
Right.
to download on the DBX website.
Right, that's the best way to do it is by the software. It's really easy. It got like a wizard configuration. So as long as you go to step number 1, step number 2, step number 3, you will be not be lost, and you don't have to write any kind of codes. They give you everything, and you decide if you're gonna use it or not. As simple as that.
Perfect. So that's the better solution. The best solution for dedicated audio is hands down the BSS. So this is a Blue 100. It's 12 by 8. There's a smaller one. It's a Blue 50, which is a 4 by 4. But those are physical analog inputs and outputs that we're talking about. You're not limited on the BSS system to only 12 by 8 or 4 by 4 on these 2 models that I'm talking about. So for instance, if you have your 12, right? So you've got 3 by 4, right? So that's 12 inputs, and then you've got your 8 outputs on the Blue 100. If you needed to add more inputs, you could very easily do that by adding, for instance, a Blue Bib. This is a break-in box, which allows for 8 additional analog channels to be put into the Blue. You kind of think about it like the Blue system is like an on-ramp and an off-ramp, right? So the Blue devices, right, they're going to onboard these to the Blue Link Highway. These are going to offboard from the Blue Link Highway. They have the ability to be able to do so. And you do that all through the software programming. It's not a big deal. It's really simple for you to be able to use once you understand. And we're going to set up an Audio Architect 101 series for our customers, so you can get familiar with how that works and looks. The point here is that if you needed additional inputs or additional outputs, you can do that without having to break the bank and buy an entire ginormous device. You can use a break-in box to onboard more analog inputs to Blue Link, or a breakout box, a Blue Bob, right? Breakout box, BOB. So you can outboard and off-ramp any of those audio sources as well. And the neat thing is that you're just going to connect these devices daisy chain. These do not connect to the network, right? This device right here, this Ethernet, connects to the network, and that's for programming and configuration so that they can be able to talk to each other, including the controllers, the wall controllers, which I'll show you in a moment. But the Blue Link devices, they do not touch the network. They go point to point, right? And then you've got control and in-out and whatnot for other logic and other types of things. Luis and Jose, please, whatever you guys want to add in regards to the BSS and the Blue series.
Okay.
I think you covered most of the important parts of the BSS. This is the high-end type of processor, which is like an open architecture. So once again, this type of processor that we're seeing here, it's up to your imagination. Whatever you need to achieve regarding processing, DSP, delays, it's up to you. This obviously needs to be programmed via software. And Luis, something else that you want to add?
Well, it's important to remember that BSS is a really, it got a really long story on sound processors. For the older ones, they remember the famous OmniDrive uh, DSP on outboard processors. Well, basically, those are the same algorithms that they use on these units. So you can expect the same uh, famous sound quality of BSS from the OmniDrive to these units. So they sound really good. Plus, they do all the matrix and routing audio, in a really super wave to do it. So you get the best thing on the both world. You get the utility and you get the quality.
And the other neat thing about this is that it's an open architecture. I don't know if you mentioned that. So you've got, if you needed an additional EQ in a DVX, well, you don't have it, right? But if you needed an additional EQ that you hadn't programmed before, well, because it's open architecture, you just expand the line and you add that other EQ, or you add a mixer, or you add all of those digital components, those processors, those device, whether it be a ducker or a limiter or a compressor or a graphic EQ or a parametric EQ or a whatever, a filter of some sort, a delay. If you've got, for instance, a big auditorium, you can put a delay so that if you're sitting towards the back, you don't get hit by the audio twice. You only get hit once, So it's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal line of product, and it's my go-to. Thank you. Now, this is your example controller. This is kind of my go-to controller. It's not the only one that you have that exists, but because it has the 4 buttons and it has a volume control on it, which also works as a push to mute, as a for instance, and it's completely customizable. These are powered PoE, unlike the DVX, which all get home run. They daisy chain and then get home run into the DVX. These BSS controllers are all PoE. They all touch the network, and they all talk to each other and to the BSS controller via network. Right? So another advantage of using the Luxel managed switches, because if you wanted to be able to use a VLAN separate for the audio, you can do that, but you don't have to. And the Luxel switches that are managed for the most part they have PoE built into them. Now, speakers. Some of the speakers that we talked about previously, depending on what the application is, we talked about some of your more background audio speakers, but Jose and Luis, this is our acoustic controlled, our application engineered line of speakers. What makes these different from the other ones that we were talking about before?
Well, in the matter of the matter of driver, you got more robust drivers. The woofers are really more to the high end sound reinforcement quality woofers, and the box is a plywood cabinet or box. So they're really designed to the heavy duty side of the sounds. They play loud. They manage really high levels of power. They're just designed to be used and abused day by day, without problems. And they come in different angles. You can choose between maybe 90 by 50 or 120 by 60. You got different options. Patterns, right? That's the word. Patterns. So you have like a better coverage of the area. So basically, that's the main difference between this and a regular, more simple plastic box.
Let me add something to that. These boxes comes with a compression driver, a high compression driver. I mean, we talk about plastic boxes, and usually it's like a 3/4 type of some dome tweeter. In this case, these babies are designed to handle microphones and, as Luis said, reproduce music at higher sound pressure levels. So that's why this series, on top of that, the high compression driver will, you will get the benefits of this type of cabinet.
Perfect. And we can order these also weatherized as well, right?
Yes, you can, sir.
Perfect.
Depending on the environment situation that you are dealing with, if it's like an inside type of nightclub or bar, we have different nomenclatures to do that. And if you have to use this next to the beach, or once again at the beach, we can weatherize with the proper treatment in order to make it work.
Perfect. And that'd be the WRC and the WRX. We know all this stuff. So when you guys just let us know when you're placing an order, hey, we need something that's going to be exposed to salt, or it's going to be under air, or whatever the case may be, we can do that. So the other neat thing about, like, if you were to use, go ahead.
I just want to add a little more, one more thing, is that those speakers, they come in black or white, but they can be painted. Basically, they're really easy to paint. So if you need like a custom color or something like that, you can do it really, really easy, and they will look great.
Perfect. Perfect. Now, the nice thing also about using either the DBX or the BSS is that you can have in an audio distributed area, right? So let's say you've got the pendant or the in-ceiling speakers, but you did want some of those low-end frequencies that the in-ceiling speakers can't get to, because I mean, let's be honest, a 15-inch woofer is always going to give you lower lows than an 8-inch woofer. I mean, it's just simple physics. So if we needed to be able to get to some of those lower frequencies, because let's be honest, in some of the territory that it is that we're talking about, in the Caribbean, the English-speaking Caribbean, you'll like a lot of bass. And there's nothing wrong with that. And you should have the bass. So, but where an 8-inch woofer cannot do, a 15-inch woofer can. And so what we can do is we can mix and match. So you can have your distributed audio just to be able to get a little bit of background music and have that going, and then supplement that with a 12 or a 15-inch subwoofer, and you're going to be sitting pretty, let me tell you, because even on a 70-volt system, those 6.5-inch speakers, to be able to operate your mids and your highs, it can get loud depending on what the watt tap is that you set there. And you pair it up with a 15-inch woofer, you're going to be sitting pretty, let me tell you. Now, amplification is what we were talking about before, the CDI series. This is the drive core, my favorite series. So in order to be able to pair the couple of speakers that we were talking about just a moment ago, we really needed a 600-watt amplifier. So the great thing about this is, again, you've got your Ethernet port that's going to be for your communication for your programming. You've got your Blue Link ports that's going to be for your communication protocol to be able to send. So here's a neat thing. Let's say that you've got your 4 analog outputs of your Blue 50 occupied, right? You don't have any more analog outputs, but the customer wanted to be able to add another zone of audio. Well, you've got 2 options. In some other competitor systems, you would have to buy an upgraded system, right? You have to buy a different processor, reprogram that, etc. With the case of the Blue, right, the BSS and the Blue and the Crown and the Blue Link technology, by adding a Blue Link enabled amplifier, all you have to do is do a small little bit of reprogramming in order to be able to add those Blue Link channels in the Blue 50, and you're just running a category 6 cable. It can be a regular patch cable if it's in the same rack, and you're golden. Or if you needed it a little bit further, you can run up to 100 meters, category 5 or category 6 cable, and now you've got that amplifier, this amplifier, powering up your speakers with no analog cables run, only your network jack, only a network connection. It's really the best of both worlds here. Now, here's the other neat thing that I like about it. Let's say that you've got a gym space where you needed to be able to add a microphone locally. You could put that input into this input right here. You could add your microphone right here, and that onboards it onto the Blue Link, send it back over the processor for processing it, send it back over to the amplifier for amplification. So now you've run out of your inputs on the Blue 50 again, but you can add an input to one of these 2 or both of these 2 inputs, and now you can onboard it onto the Blue Link system. And it gives you that great flexibility without having to, again, break the bank in order to be able to add more processors or whatever the case may be. It's really flexible, and I like that so much. Now, for the subwoofer, we needed something that was going to be a little bit beefier. We needed a 1200 watt, and it's the exact same process as before, right? You've got your Blue Link inputs and outputs. You've got your Ethernet for control. You can do any kind of logic that you want. You've got your analog input, which you don't necessarily need because we're doing Blue Link for the most part. Oh, and here's another great thing. Let's say that you've got an area where, I don't know, you just wanted to make it redundant. So you do a Blue Link compatibility, right? So you're sending your microphone over via Blue Link to your amplifier, right? But you also want to run an analog from your Blue Link into your amplifier. So you've got the exact same sound via an analog cable and via a Blue Link cable. If for whatever reason you get an electrical contractor in there and he cuts one of the cables, the amplifier is smart enough in order to say, hey, I lost my Blue Link connectivity here. It'll automatically switch over lightning quick to your analog input, and you wouldn't even know it. And then you can do logic, and you can you do reports on that, Jose and Luis, so that you can get a notification, say, hey, we lost this connectivity?
It will get in the amplifier log. In this case, this amplifier doesn't handle the ability to send you an email, but we got amplifiers that can do that, you know. So
on the DCI series, right?
Right. In this case, you will get a log. It will be I don't know how to say it, right on the log. So if you go to service the amplifier, you can check the log and you will see what happened that day at that hour. But you will not receive like a message. But on the DCI series, yeah, you will be able to receive a message telling you that there's something happening on the amplifier.
Perfect. Now the DCI is the big brother of the CDI, and I wish that there was a little bit of different of a nomenclature, CD versus CD, DC versus CD, but that's the way that it is. But the DCI is the big brother, and they have some amplifiers that go up to 2,450 watts, if I remember right.
That's right.
Awesome. So that's really what we wanted to be able to show you guys, where we give you a good, a better, and a best solution for, you know, depending on what kind of an application it is that you need. The question box is open. If you guys have any questions, I'm going to stop the recording in the meantime. And thank you all for showing up and who are watching the recording.